Hi, I'm Caitlin Kano and welcome to Catholic Stewardship in Real Life. Today we're talking about living on one income. Now, many people choose to live on one income, and it's something that we encourage at Compass Catholic Ministries. Reasons for living on one income can include just generally making life easier. It can also help you prepare for children. The additional money can be used to retire early. It can help you prepare for job loss, and it also can be great for someone who has variable income to live only on one income should that second income go away. Today we're joined by Cullen and Katie Sheppard. Cullen and Katie Sheppard met when they served as Judge Advocate Corps officers in the Army about 16 years ago. They've been privileged to serve on active duty and in the reserves. Cullen currently works for the Social Security Administration as an administrative law judge and serves as an instructor at the Department of Law at West Point. Katie retired from the JAG Corps and works in ministry as the Director of Advancement and Stewardship at the Cathedral of Christ the King. They reside in Lexington, Kentucky, and are blessed with 4 children, ages 2 to 16.
We are 45 years old, and well, you're 44. We've been married for 12 years. We have 4 children. And why are we presenting on living on one income, even though we are both working? Because we really believe that there's such fruit that comes from the decision and the discipline to live on one income, even if you're not actually doing it. I think, most couples come to a marriage, having an idea or if they haven't already started their career and invested in their career, they have an idea of what they want to do. They have education behind them. And so it's very hard to all of a sudden kind of shift focus to one person saying, I'm going to put it aside. And I think that's kind of a misconception that one person who may not want to work full time is putting it aside. We can talk about that a little bit later, but we were no exception. We both had lots of schooling under our belt. We both were attorneys, and we met in the Army, in the JAG Corps. We had those careers, but we also had commitments to the Army. And, we had, at the time that our commitments were up, we had 2 children, and we kind of made that decision. We had a new chapter in our lives to look at beyond the Army. And so, we decided that we were going to try to, do it with one income and have me stay at home. And then, so we had lots of different, decision points to make. And Colin, I don't know if you want to take it from there.
I would going back in time, probably we had only been married about 14 months, so very early on in our marriage. And I'm originally from Georgia. Katie is from Connecticut. We were in New York. And the idea that we were going to settle in New York for this boy from South Georgia was a tough call, and we did. And I can remember when we were leaving, and our exit from the Army was the exact same day. But I can remember applying for the mortgage, and I can remember we both committed. I didn't want the mortgage company, even though we were working at the time, and even though we were both applying for the mortgage at the same time. I didn't want the mortgage company to even look at her income at the time, because I knew that there was an end date to it. And that was kind of how we approached that. And then that's kind of how we approached the first really year to 2 years after we both left the Army, is that we were essentially going to live on my income. And that was essentially that was the income.
So we bought a house, and I stayed home, and I was able to stay in the reserves. And so it wasn't like, and I think there's lots of opportunities to not put your passions, your vocation, your career on the shelf, and you can kind of still continue to stay current in lots of different ways. But I came home, and we had a 6-month-old and a kindergartner, and I didn't last very long. Even though that was our intent, like that's what I wanted to do. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I don't think I had a really strong support group in terms of what it looked like to stay at home. I think up in the Northeast, it's very expensive, and most families do have both parents working. And I grew up with a mom that always worked. So I also didn't really have that, I guess, that modeling of what it was like to have someone at home, solely devoted to the kids. So anyway, that was my story. But the reason why I think that there's such lessons in it is because when I chose to go back to work, I got to do it completely on my terms because we had already made that decision that we were going to live on one income. So I got to say, okay, yes, I will go back, but I'll only do it if it works for our family.
And there was a lot of freedom in that because you could, I can remember there was one time where she was mobilized, but it was, and this was for like a 6-month period. They offered her the opportunity to stay on for another 6 months. And at that point in time, I think she just said, I think 6 months is good at this point in time. And it gave us freedom to say, we didn't have to, she didn't have to work at that point in time because we had that approach early on.
Back to that time period. So this is 10 years ago. And I was thinking about what things were we not doing because we had one income. And quite honestly, I can't think of one thing that I felt like I was missing out on or that I did not have. My mom at the time, she was diagnosed with dementia. And then my dad died somewhat unexpectedly. And so, oh my goodness, I probably was working more than I needed to kind of in that sandwich generation of taking care of the kids and my parents. But I had that flexibility to drop back in my hours, and I would not have traded that opportunity for anything, honestly, for anything. And I don't know how I would have been able to do it if I had a full-time job or was, my family was relying on my income. But anyway, yeah, no, I don't remember. I don't feel like we wanted for nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's important when we left active duty. Katie she outranks me at the house and she outranked me in the Army, and she made more money than me when we left active duty. She wanted me to make sure that was known. And so I think sometimes when you have a limited amount, it allows you to be more focused, and that you don't overextend yourself. And I think that is definitely we never wanted to overextend ourselves, and having more of a limited amount, not having two incomes, it did allow us. It did focus us a little more in making sure that we weren't going into debt, that we were saving up for a car. And those were fun. It made it a fun purchase versus a scary purchase.
Right.
I think you approach it as an opportunity. I think you approach it as an opportunity to either take a study if you have more time to focus on tracking your expenses over the last 30 days to see where you can cut back a little bit, and to take it as we just went through Lent, but a good approach is to look at Lent and say, I'm gonna cut back and see what our expenses were in the last 2 or 3 months, and see what we can cut back to hopefully live on that one income. So essentially everything else after that is extra.
And I think there's so many people that at some point, I have to believe most women and most mothers at some point think, oh, I can't do all of this. I'd love to just stay home. And whether you take the steps to actually make that a reality or not is another story, because that's the hard work on several different levels. But if you've been affected during COVID-19, in the sense that you are at home now, either still working from home or have been furloughed or lost your job. You might be looking at it from a completely different perspective now that you're able to spend so much more time with your family. And I know that I recognize that there's just less stress in having to live in such a structured environment with school and sports and meetings, that it's nice. I think there's a lot less anxiety. Anyway, I look at it as, if it was something that you were considering, perhaps this time has just really just ripped the Band-Aid off, and moved you that much closer to it. So, whether you feel like you have to go back to work or want to go back to work, at least you're going back a little bit with, eyes wide open, and like Cullen said, using this time to budget. I think earlier in our marriage, I would say, well, we have a budget, and Cullen would argue, we actually don't have a budget, Katie. We don't really have an actual budget.
I didn't say it like that.
But he's right. But, I think when you're putting your family first and you're looking at your finances because you want to improve the quality of the time with your family, and preserve options later, I think sitting down and talking about finances can be, it can be a sixth love language. You know what I mean? It really can bring you closer together as a family. So, and it's a great time to do it. It's a great time to take one of the Compass studies. Whether it's an attorney or being, in the Army, it somewhat becomes your identity. And I was well aware of that. And I guess I, also wanted to challenge that, because I didn't want that to define me. So I was well aware of that pull, and maybe it's pride, of not necessarily wanting to step back. Unfortunately, in our field, it's like, you're either 100% in or you're not in at all. There's not a whole lot of part-time lawyer gigs out there. But I was so fortunate that as a reservist, I could still, keep up my bar license. And I could still say that I was actively practicing, while not doing it full time. So, that was a real blessing. And, being able to, and so there's no way, had I accepted a full-time legal job, I'm not sure we both could have managed children, full-time positions, and serving in the reserves. So in a way, it allowed me to continue to serve my country, again, on my terms. There was, one of the things I did do to kind of scratch that itch of feeling like I needed to just continue moving forward professionally is I started volunteering for CASA, which was court-appointed special advocates. So, that was something that just helped me feel like I was still actively learning and participating and helping. But what's interesting is that once we got to Kentucky, so we're fast forwarding now that we had 3 children, and we moved to Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, and I was still working very, very limited hours, but still doing that from home. I wasn't looking for a job necessarily when we first got here, but there was a position at our church, and Cullen kept saying, "Oh, you should look into this." And many, many months went by, and the position would still be in the bulletin. And finally, I think it was like 6 months. Finally, I said, "You know what? I'll ask about it. I'll ask, can it be done part-time? Is it, I'll find out more." And anyway, ended up being blessed with that position, which has nothing to do with the law whatsoever. But it was that decision early on, 10 years earlier, of moving to one income that allowed me to move in an absolutely completely different direction. It allowed me to do something that I never thought that I would be working in a church environment for the church. And the blessings, and I like to just call them, they're just fringe benefits really, that have flowed because of that decision for our entire family, it's really immeasurable. So, I mean, that's another fruit that you don't think about when you think, okay, I'm going to be disciplined enough to live on one income so I can preserve these choices that God has for me, has in store for me that I don't even know that are coming later on. And then we had one more child. So I needed that flexibility.
Transition, I think it was, I don't want to say it was easier, but it was by having a hard date of 1 September 2009 for both of us. Like, I mean, having that forcing factor right there was a very positive thing. And so people may, at this point in time with the virus, they may have a forcing factor where it might not be possible to go back to work after everything is lifted. So that was not a step that we took, but it was kind of this roadblock. It was this block that the Army put in place for us that really enabled us to that was a firm date. And then there was a lot of faith and trust at that point in time. I knew I had a job. I knew that was going to happen, and I knew that Katie didn't. So it was coming no matter what. And so, I mean, the biggest step that we took was, I think, the approach to the mortgage, and then just really kind of buckling down initially, because when we had two incomes, and you kind of really, you didn't budget at all, because you felt like you always had enough, always had more than enough. So so in terms of concrete steps, approaching the mortgage, and so individuals that are approaching either debt or a budget, I mean, I think that's the concrete step, is to essentially remove the other's income out of the way, and just kind of be laser focused on just that one income and the bills that you have to pay.
And I think that there's this move towards kind of minimalism, with just less is more. And I think that's another kind of gem from COVID-19. What we have noticed, you brought to my attention, is that during this period of time, we're spending so much less money than we have before. And, I attribute it to, we're just not stepping in the stores, and my kids aren't going to birthday parties, and we're not going to sports tournaments. So, the most of our disposable income at this point in time is really just going to food. So, I mean, again, it's another opportunity where you see that if you could turn it on tomorrow, those things that I was purchasing, they're not making me any more happy than I am today in this situation.
You had asked about concrete steps, and I think this is a great opportunity to talk about, to just, and I think you mentioned the word teamwork. This is, whatever Katie accomplishes, I feel like I was right there with her accomplishing it, and whatever I've accomplished, it's the 85% as a result of her efforts. And so I think when you're going down to one income, you're both earning it, and I think that is a good perspective, and because it is a joint effort. And so I can vividly remember the time that Katie was promoted. I was already in Kentucky. She was still in New York, and I saw it on FaceTime, and I remember being just so proud, because I remember the times where I was taking care of the kids during drill weekend, or when she would go away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks of annual training, and I felt like that was as much my accomplishment. I really hope that Katie thinks that anything I accomplish is her accomplishment as well. So that teamwork is important, and looking at that one income as both of your incomes, I think is an important perspective.
I really think that if you look at moving to one income as a goal, then it really it can bring you closer, and you have conversations that you wouldn't have normally had, and you you really do have to involve the entire family. Not that you want to put any kind of burden on your children, but letting them be a part of kind of the goal setting for the entire family, I think, is another fruit.
If you and your spouse are considering making the jump to living on one income, here are some steps you may want to consider. Number 1, make a plan or budget before that second income goes away. Second, plan for large irregular bills. These are your true expenses. These are things like car registration bills or tax bills. They don't hit every month, but when they do affect your bottom line. Third, downsize your expenses where you can. Fourth, use your retirement benefits. Just because you're living on one income does not mean you shouldn't be saving towards retirement. And finally, number 5, be aware of lifestyle creep. If you're interested in Compass Catholic Ministries and would like to learn more about our Bible studies and our other offerings, please go to compasscatholic.org. And we also invite you to like and subscribe our new YouTube channel. Thank you so much. God bless.